Learned special counsel Jack Smith is officially moving to drop the January 6th election interference. Smith charged Trump last year with plotting to overturn the 2020 election and illegally storing classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate. But the Department of Justice had signaled it will not prosecute a sitting president and team upon returning to the White House. Let's get right to ABC senior reporter Catherine Falders. Catherine, what's the latest?
So we've been reporting, of course, that special counsel Jack Smith was looking filing that has just come out and posted on the court's docket, Diane, is that Jack Smith is asking the judge in a motion to dismiss, to essentially dismiss the case, that they are going to throw out. They issued a superseding indictment, if you will, back in August after the Supreme Court ruled that Trump was essentially protected of those acts that they found official. So this was the August indictment with full legal counsel within DOJ to figure out and assess how they could move forward with both of these cases, given that Trump won the election. Now, they say here that through that consultation that they believed that after on federal indictment and prosecution of a sitting president applied to this situation, given that Trump is president-elect. They said that the department believed that this case must be dismissed, these alleged offenses. In fact, they go out of their way to state that in this 6-page filing. They say, the special counsel does, that prohibition, so the prohibition not to charge a sitting president or a president-elect, that prohibition, government stands fully behind. But the reality of this is they're asking the judge in this motion to dismiss to toss out the case. They're saying that they still believe the gravity of these charges. The question is, in terms of what's next, what do we see that report? Is it drafted? It has to go through a classification review. That could take weeks. So are they up against the clock here, and do they release something publicly in report form before the inauguration?
And let's bring this case back after Trump leaves office.
Well, the statute of limitations will run out in connection with this case, and it's extremely unlikely that that will happen. They prosecuted a candidate, a former president that they knew was likely going to be the Republican nominee. He was such. Former President Trump bet on himself and that he would win the election, and in doing this case was effectively going to end. Today we're getting the specifics as to how. The case now will now be quietly winding down. We'll have January 6th case has been concluded based on this if the judge accepts it. We expect later today he will move to remove President Trump from the classified documents case, which is being continued. So the question is, who in the special counsel's office would continue to do that work? Would they simply shut down and allow DOJ to move forward with the appeal? Wrapped up.
And I want to go to ABC's chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, because, John, the move to drop these cases isn't unexpected, but it is still significant, especially given the amount of...
Jack Smith was appointed special counsel almost exactly 2 years ago, and over the course of the January 6th investigation, he went to the Supreme Court to fight to get access. Was Donald Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. So were top aides on his campaign and in his White House. This is an investigation where some special counsel investigation. When you consider that this investigation was preceded by a lengthy investigation in Congress, the January 6th committee, which spent over a year on under oath, including almost all of the president's closest political aides, both in the White House and at his campaign, and established a very duly certified presidential election that he tried to undermine the core of American democracy. Now, this is all done. So you might say, Diane, that this case, the January, so it didn't come up right up against a presidential election, but it never got before a jury. But you could argue that it got before something much larger than a typical jury. All of this, he ultimately will not be held to account in the criminal court system for his actions to overturn the presidential election in 2020.
Stand now.
Two of them, one down in Georgia, which has been tied up sort of indefinitely in the courts and appears to be going nowhere fast. That case certainly would have been conviction of the president-elect is the one here in New York. And his attorneys are trying to get that conviction for 34 felony counts of falsifying business records thrown out. They're arguing that, and there's a line in the opinion from Jack Smith where he says the constitutional interests of a president in his unfettered performance of his duties must take to make their final arguments due next month to try and convince a judge here in New York to drop Trump's criminal conviction, even though the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. But it's well possible, Diane, that Trump will enter office with only one case hanging over his head, and that's a civil fraud judgment of about $500 million. Diane?
Political to impact the legal. So what do you make of these cases seemingly coming to an end in this way? Could it impact any other January 6 cases or any other co-defendants in any of these other cases?
The realm of legal, meaning, yes, there are these DOJ guidelines, et cetera, but he's for so long tried to distance himself, separate, put up. There's another important point which Jonathan touched on, which is about the timing here. The Trump team, as a legal matter, has had an enormous success in delay move forward. These cases could have been tried. They potentially could have been resolved. But the Trump team successfully delayed the cases to get to this point. DOJ didn't bring the charges right in 2021. It seemed there was reluctance on the part of the Attorney General to bring any criminal prosecution of Donald Trump decisions. So there are two significant timing issues to think about there, the successes of Trump's delays and the questions that will be asked about the DOJ about when they started these cases at the beginning.
Spokesperson, the incoming White House communications director, Stephen Chung, says the American people reelected President Trump with an overwhelming mandate. Chung says today's decision by DOJ ends the incoming communications director, Stephen Chung. I do think it's worth pointing out, though, as we've been discussing, that Jack Smith and DOJ are not saying that they believe, and that they're not saying they don't have that evidence. They're saying that because of their assessment internally, and only because Trump is the president-elect and won the election, that is the reasoning for this. They stand by that this is not the last we'll hear from the Trump people about it, or President-elect Trump himself, and also particularly from now until the inauguration. Do we see a report? Could we see more?
Thank you all, and our coverage continues on ABC News Live and abcnews.com, and David will have the latest on World News Tonight. I'm Diane Macedo in New York. Have a great day.
Check it in 3 different places, the wing, the thigh, and even the breast. And then when you're serving it, you don't want to leave it out. This is the mistake I make, leaving it out for too long. You don't want to leave it out for 2 hours or more. That increases the risk of bacterial growth and increases the...
Me too.
I almost poisoned my now husband.
Oh.
When I first tried
you almost had him.
He tells that story. GMA3.
And just ahead on GMA3, a lot of talk about the safety of these weight loss drug combos.